A black woman stands silently as a judge hands down her sentence without allowing her to speak. When she finally reveals her ID, the entire courtroom freezes in disbelief. What happens next will leave you speechless. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on where you're watching from. Let's get started. It all began on a blisteringly hot Monday morning in Branch County Courthouse. The air conditioner struggled to keep pace with the crowd of weary defendants, family members, and curious onlookers who filled the worn pews in Courtroom B. At the front of the room, Judge Theodore Blackstone presided with the clipped efficiency of a man who believed the law was an unshakable tool in his hands. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and known for his impatience, particularly when it came to the people standing before him. On this day, more than a dozen individuals had already shuffled to the defendant's table for swift processing. Some were there for petty theft, others for minor traffic violations. None seemed to draw the judge's attention for more than a couple of minutes. Then came the case of Regina Martin, a black woman in her mid-30s, who approached the podium with a slight limp. She wore a simple white blouse and dark slacks, her hair swept back in a neat ponytail, her expression composed but tense. As she stood before the bench, she tightened her grip on the small purse at her side. Every movement spoke of self-restraint. She had been instructed by the bailiff to keep quiet until the judge addressed her, but she could feel the weight of countless eyes settling on her, as though everyone in the room sensed something unusual about her situation. The clerk read out the charge: trespassing with intent to commit a misdemeanor. Regina did not visibly react, though a flicker of indignation passed across her features. In the wooden seats behind her, a few voices murmured. Most people present had no idea what her real story was. They only saw the charge on the docket. Trespassing might sound trivial, but in this county, the law could be interpreted in merciless ways. Judge Blackstone raised his gaze and peered down at Regina. "Ms. Martin," he said, voice echoing in the cavernous room, "I see you've decided to represent yourself today." His tone suggested disapproval, as though she had made an egregious error in protocol. When Regina opened her mouth to speak, he cut her short with a lifted palm. "Don't say anything yet. I want to understand why you believe you could just walk onto private property." She attempted again to speak, but the judge never gave her a real chance. He rearranged some papers, then turned to the prosecutor, a nervous-looking man named Griffin, whose tie was perpetually askew. Griffin began summarizing the alleged facts of the case. Regina Martin had been found on the premises of a luxury condo complex late at night, behind a locked gate. Security officers discovered her in what they described as a restricted area. When confronted, she claimed she had every right to be there. Now the state wanted to see her punished. Regina tried to interject more than once. Her parted lips indicated she had clarifications or explanations. However, Judge Blackstone had no patience for elaborate defenses. "Enough," he barked, slamming down his gavel lightly on the polished wood. "Given the straightforward nature of this case and the defendant's lack of representation, I see no need for extensive back and forth. Ms. Martin, you'll remain silent until I've heard enough to make a ruling." A ripple of discomfort flitted through the courtroom. A woman near the back tensed, clearly troubled by the turn of events. A young man in the front row frowned, pulling out his phone to record. Regina's eyes flared, not with anger, but with quiet resolution. She seemed to stand taller in that moment, as though summoning an internal strength. Judge Blackstone noticed none of this. He was scanning the folder containing the standard summary report the arresting officer had filed. "All right," he said, returning his gaze to Regina. "Trespassing is a serious issue, especially in a gated residential complex. We have multiple incidents in this district of property owners fearing for their safety. We can't allow this sort of invasion." He spoke as if addressing a child. Given the evidence and your refusal to clarify your motives, even though I've given you an opportunity to speak through counsel, I'm prepared to pass sentence." Judge Blackstone's words were startlingly swift. Regina opened her mouth again to protest, but once more he silenced her with an abrupt gesture. "I said enough. The time for debate has passed. Your charge is trespassing with intent, which can carry up to 6 months in jail. In your case, Ms. Martin, I find it appropriate to hand down a short stint that might teach you to respect private property. You have shown no remorse, no willingness to explain your presence there in any way that satisfies this court." He leaned forward. "I sentence you, Ms. Martin, to 30 days in county jail, effective immediately. Bailiff, take her into custody." A hushed gasp spread through the spectators. Regina's lips parted in shock, but no words emerged. The uniformed bailiff stepped forward, motioning for her to turn around for handcuffs. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. She hadn't even spoken one complete sentence in her defense, and now she faced incarceration. A distant part of her mind knew this was going to be complicated. Still, she remained outwardly calm, though an observer might see a faint tremor in her shoulders. In that heavy silence, Regina made a quick decision, one that would change the course of the entire proceeding. "Your Honor, please," she finally said, ignoring his directive to remain quiet. Her voice, tinged with urgency, cut across the hush. The bailiff paused, uncertain. Judge Blackstone's eyes flared with annoyance. "I told you—" She lifted her ID from inside her small purse, the motion so swift that the bailiff nearly intervened. But as the laminated card caught the fluorescent light, something shifted in the air. Regina didn't wave it around. She simply held it out, her expression resolute. Several people craned their necks, trying to see what was printed on that simple rectangle of plastic. The judge froze, confusion flickering across his features. The ID bore an official emblem, something he recognized from countless legal references. Slowly, as if compelled by an unseen force, he gestured for the bailiff to bring it closer. The bailiff retrieved the card, stepped up to the bench, and handed it over. An electric tension coiled in the room. People leaned forward, transfixed. Judge Blackstone frowned down at the ID, and an uneasy hush followed. His stern features began to transform, eyes widening, jaw tightening. In an instant, it seemed as though he had been struck by an invisible blow. He stared at the photograph, then the name, then the official insignia that verified the card's authenticity. All at once, the judge's posture shifted, and the severity he'd worn so confidently now appeared dangerously close to unraveling. He cleared his throat, glanced at Regina, then returned his gaze to the ID. "Ms. Martin," he said, a new note creeping into his voice. It might have been uncertainty. "Where did you get— how is this—" He stuttered, uncharacteristically at a loss for words. Regina's eyes met his, calm but resolute. "Your Honor, if I might finally speak, I believe you'll understand why I had a lawful reason to be on that property, and why, in fact, the entire premise of these charges was built on a misunderstanding." She spoke quietly, yet each word was crisp and firm. The bailiff, who had been ready to escort her out in handcuffs, now hovered uncertainly, watching the judge, who appeared to be wrestling with some inner debate. The hush in the courtroom had deepened into something almost tangible, each second stretching out. Nobody dared to interrupt. Whatever that ID revealed, it had caused Judge Blackstone to re-examine everything he had just done. "Ms. Martin," he said again, in a halting voice that was miles away from his stern, commanding tone of minutes earlier. I think we need to revisit the facts of this case in light of new information. Bailiff, do not take her into custody yet." Regina's posture remained composed, but a flicker of relief passed across her face. She looked toward the spectators, who were as startled as she was by the judge's abrupt pivot. Then she turned back to him, waiting for him to say more. Judge Blackstone set the ID gently on the bench before him, as though it were made of delicate glass. His gaze shifted between the ID and Regina. He drew a long breath, visibly steadying himself. "Court will recess for 15 minutes, he announced, voice quavering slightly. "Ms. Martin will remain here. I need to consult with counsel and review this documentation." A low murmur spread through the rows. Everyone sensed something big was happening, though none could guess precisely what that ID signified. From the posture of the judge to the stunned look on the bailiff's face, it was obvious this was more than a standard oversight. This was something that might unravel an entire chain of assumptions, perhaps even unearth truths the court had chosen to ignore. Regina's heart pounded, yet she allowed herself only a controlled exhale. She had entered this courtroom convinced nobody would listen. And for a painful moment, her fear had been justified as Judge Blackstone sentenced her without letting her utter a word in her own defense. But her hand had been forced. The crucial item in her purse, the ID she rarely used, the one that carried more power than anyone in that room suspected, had now changed everything. In the tense minutes that followed, the judge disappeared through a side door with the prosecutor and the bailiff. Conversations rose and fell around the room. Some speculated in urgent whispers about what the ID revealed. Others tapped out frantic messages on their phones, racing to break the story on social media before anyone else. A handful of onlookers tried to approach Regina, but the stern glare of a second bailiff kept them at a distance. Alone by the defendant's table, Regina stood silent, her mind racing ahead to what might come next. She wondered if the judge would ignore the significance of that card, or if he would do the right thing. She wondered how many times he might have dismissed defendants without hearing them out, and how many people never had the kind of leverage she just used. Yet, beyond the swirl of uncertainty, she felt a ripple of determination. Whatever came of these next steps, she would be ready. She would speak her truth, no matter who tried to stifle her. She had spent too long safeguarding the details of her life, hiding them from the countless biases that so often shaped people's judgments. Now, with her freedom at stake, she had brought everything to the surface, and the judge's shifting demeanor suggested he knew full well the power she wielded. 15 minutes later, the side door creaked open. Judge Blackstone emerged, lips pressed into a thin line. He returned to the bench with measured steps, the ID card still resting before him. The tension in the room rose another notch. Finally, clearing his throat, he spoke in a subdued, almost chastened tone. "Ms. Martin, please step forward. There have been significant developments that this court must address immediately." Regina lifted her chin, moving to the spot beneath the judge's gaze. She saw the confusion and concern etched into his features. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The next words out of Judge Blackstone's mouth, everyone sensed, would set the tone for a reckoning that would soon ripple beyond these walls. Judge Blackstone took a moment to collect himself before speaking. He folded his hands atop the bench, gaze shifting from the ID to Regina Martin and back again. The hush in the courtroom was so complete that the buzzing of the fluorescent lights seemed loud. Finally, he cleared his throat, leaning into the microphone. "This court has received new information," he began, voice still subdued. "It appears Ms. Martin holds a credential from a federal agency. At this time, we need to clarify how that affects both the charge and the sentencing already announced." Regina did not move. Her expression conveyed composure but also determination, as though she had come prepared for the judge's next words. Most of the spectators only saw the tension in her shoulders, how her fingers curled tight at her sides. Those who were especially observant noticed the faint tremor of emotional adrenaline in her posture. No one spoke as the prosecutor, Griffin, stepped forward. He was visibly rattled. "Your Honor," he said, clearing his throat with a nervous cough, "I haven't been privy to the specifics of that ID. I'd like to see it. After all, if Ms. Martin's role intersects with federal law enforcement or—" Judge Blackstone held up a hand. "We will address that in chambers. For now, I'm suspending the sentence. That means Ms. Martin will not be taken to jail until further notice." He glanced around, meeting the eyes of a few reporters who had surged into the back rows, alerted by the sudden break in routine. "I'm also issuing a temporary gag order on this matter to maintain court integrity." Regina exhaled slowly, relief and resolve mingling in her expression. The bailiff motioned for her to step aside, while the judge instructed the rest of the courtroom to remain seated. Then he rose and disappeared through the same side door, presumably awaiting the prosecutor and Regina in his private office. 3 minutes later, a different bailiff escorted Regina out of the courtroom through a narrow hallway behind the bench. A smattering of stunned whispers rippled through the crowd. The typical business of the day was put on hold for a case that suddenly seemed to pierce the normal routines of municipal justice. People in the gallery stared at each other in confusion. A few tried to guess what sort of ID would cause a judge to reverse his own sentencing so abruptly. Inside the judge's chambers, a windowless, wood-paneled room with tall shelves of law books, Regina stood with her back straight. Her eyes flicked from the prosecutor to the judge, then rested on her ID, which now lay on a table between them. Griffin touched the corner of the ID and drew back as though it were charged with electricity. "This is legitimate?" he asked, glancing at Regina, then at the judge. Regina's voice carried quiet authority. "It is." Judge Blackstone exhaled through his nose. "And you can confirm your current role?" "Yes, Your Honor," she answered. "I'm part of a federal investigative team focusing on property development fraud and racketeering in this district. My presence at that condo complex was part of a sanctioned operation." The prosecutor's eyebrows jumped. "Meaning your trespassing charge is—" "Completely baseless," Regina interjected, though her tone remained respectful. "The company that owns the complex is under a sealed federal investigation. I was conducting preliminary surveillance, but due to the constraints of the operation, I couldn't disclose my identity to local security. They weren't made aware that a federal probe is ongoing, so they saw me, assumed criminal intent, and contacted local authorities." Judge Blackstone rubbed his forehead. "Why didn't you say this earlier?" Her response was measured. "I tried. You didn't let me speak." Silence settled, thick with unspoken implications. Griffin coughed and shifted his weight. Judge Blackstone eyed Regina with something akin to remorse, though it was layered beneath his usual judicial demeanor. "I see," he said, voice subdued. "When I read the arrest file, it seemed straightforward. Now I realize we were missing critical information." Regina nodded, arms still at her sides, as disciplined as a soldier at attention. "I respect the court's procedures, Your Honor, but I was given no opportunity to clarify. Once you pronounced sentence, I had no choice but to reveal my identification to avoid further obstruction of a federal mission." Another hush fell, broken only by the muted hum of an antiquated air vent. The judge glanced at Griffin, whose eyes darted nervously across the ID on the table. Griffin cleared his throat again. "Judge, given this new evidence, I'd move to dismiss the charges against Ms. Martin. She was operating under official instructions. Any trespass was within the scope of federal investigative authority, or at least not a crime in the sense alleged." Blackstone nodded. "Understood. However, before we dismiss anything, we need to ensure no laws were broken when Ms. Martin entered that private property. Federal investigations can be complicated. But if she truly had official clearance—" "I did," Regina said, cutting through his doubt. "I have the documents in my vehicle to confirm my field assignment. I was gathering evidence on money laundering and contractor fraud. The property managers have been channeling funds for illicit deals." Our intelligence indicated that I might find relevant data by conducting an on-site review without drawing attention. Unfortunately, a guard discovered me in a restricted area, and I couldn't blow my cover at that time. The prosecutor inhaled sharply. Then I'll need copies of all those documents to file with the court. We can expedite a motion to dismiss, but the question remains, do we mention the specifics of your case? Regina frowned slightly. I'd prefer that remain sealed. The entire reason I didn't declare myself at the condo was to protect the integrity of the larger investigation. If the owners know the feds are onto them, they'll destroy evidence. I came here today hoping the charge would be dropped discreetly once the truth surfaced. I never expected to be sentenced before speaking. At that pointed remark, Judge Blackstone's face grew taut. Yes. Well, it seems I was overzealous. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'll vacate your sentence. The official record can reflect that new evidence invalidates the charge. We'll also seal the hearing transcript to protect ongoing investigations. But Ms. Martin, there may be repercussions. The public portion of the docket shows your arrest, and people in that courtroom saw me hand down a sentence. They'll want explanations. She lifted her chin. All I ask is for the court to acknowledge I had legal grounds to be on the property. The rest can remain confidential under federal seal. If you can do that, my team can continue its work without tipping off the targets. Judge Blackstone exchanged a look with Griffin. The younger man nodded slowly. We can file a sealed motion stating that, upon review, the evidence compelled the court to withdraw the sentence. We won't detail your federal status. We'll cite newly discovered facts that exonerate you. That should minimize public speculation. The judge gave a resolute nod. All right, let's finalize this. Ms. Martin, you'll return to the courtroom with us. We'll formally dismiss the charge and declare the matter sealed. You can reclaim your ID and proceed with your duties. His tone was somber. I regret the haste with which I acted. A flicker of something, relief, maybe triumph, passed over Regina's face. Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate the court's cooperation. They stepped out of chambers and back into the corridor that led to the main courtroom. The bailiff trailed behind. Griffin straightened his tie, clearly rattled by how close he'd come to prosecuting someone with formidable federal connections. Meanwhile, Regina walked with quiet composure, as though she'd already filed this fiasco under lessons learned. When the courtroom doors opened, an undercurrent of tension churned through the spectators, who sensed something monumental had gone on behind closed doors. Judge Blackstone returned to his seat, banging the gavel once to restore quiet. Griffin positioned himself in front of the bench. Regina stood at the defense table, shoulders square, eyes clear. The judge cleared his throat, glancing at the gallery. Regarding the matter of Ms. Regina Martin, the court has received substantial new evidence indicating that she was lawfully present on the property in question. Therefore, the charge of trespassing with intent is dismissed with prejudice. Ms. Martin is free to go. An immediate clamor erupted, shocked gasps, murmurs, and the frantic clicking of phone cameras. The judge allowed only a brief moment for the reaction before continuing. Furthermore, due to the nature of the new information, all records of this case will be sealed. Any disclosure of specifics may be subject to court sanctions. His gaze swept over the throng, landing on the reporters. Court adjourned. Regina's relief was palpable, though she showed no outward burst of emotion. A single exhale, a subtle unclenching of her jaw, signaled her gratitude at this abrupt reversal. She bowed her head respectfully toward the judge, collected her ID from the bailiff's outstretched hand, and turned to leave. The crowd parted as she passed, the spectators hushed by a combination of awe and confusion. Some recognized that something extraordinary had just occurred. Others whispered theories. Perhaps she was a high-ranking official, or an undercover agent, or a whistleblower. A few tried to snap photos, but the bailiff's warning look kept them from hounding her. Outside the courthouse, the summer sun beat down mercilessly. Regina paused on the steps, glancing at the reporters who were jockeying for position behind a roped-off barricade. Microphones were raised, cameras aimed, but she offered no comment. The judge had effectively placed the matter under seal, meaning she had little leeway to speak freely. She swept down the steps and disappeared into the busy downtown crowd as passers-by gave her fleeting, curious glances. She headed toward a nondescript sedan parked 2 blocks away. Sliding into the driver's seat, she took a moment to let the tension subside. Her phone buzzed from the cup holder. The screen showed a text from a number labeled Special Agent Cole, reading, "Everything okay? Heard about the arrest. Need an update." Regina typed a quick reply. "Dismissed. Court sealed. Will call soon." She set the phone aside and took another steadying breath. Adrenaline still fluttering through her. The fiasco in that courtroom could have ended her assignment. Worse, it might have jeopardized the entire racketeering case if the wrong details leaked. Thankfully, she had managed to reveal just enough to extricate herself. In her side mirror, she saw a few camera operators hurrying in her direction. She turned the key in the ignition. Time to leave. As she navigated the narrow, congested streets, Regina felt relief begin to mingle with a simmering anger. None of this would have happened if the judge had bothered to let her speak at the start. His arrogance, combined with the local system's disregard for a black woman defendant, nearly derailed months of painstaking federal work. Still, there was a silver lining. No permanent damage had been done, and she remained free to continue investigating the property developers. Her next step would be to debrief with her federal handlers, provide them with a rundown of everything that had transpired, and ensure that local authorities would not attempt to sabotage her mission again. In her rearview mirror, the courthouse dwindled into the distance, overshadowed by tall office buildings and shimmering in the mid-morning heat. As she merged onto the main avenue, Regina caught sight of the condo complex's address scrawled on a sticky note by the gear shift. She would have to return there eventually, though next time she'd probably be better served approaching it with more backup or under a different guise. She thought of all the residents who might be unwittingly implicated in the fraudulent schemes. Property development fraud was rarely a victimless crime. Often, unsuspecting tenants lost their investments or became collateral damage. Her phone buzzed again, but she ignored it for now. She had spent enough time that morning dealing with urgent demands. First, she needed to breathe. She guided the sedan past construction zones and strip malls, focusing on the hum of the engine and the swirl of unanswered questions in her mind. 30 days in jail. That was the sentence Judge Blackstone had spat out when he believed she was simply trespassing. She wondered how many others had faced his judgments under similar circumstances. How many had been locked away, their voices smothered, for crimes they never committed or for misunderstandings never cleared. With a grim set to her jaw, Regina reminded herself that her job involved more than just investigating financial crimes. It involved peeling back layers of corruption that thrived on snap judgments. Someday soon, she promised herself, she would revisit how that courtroom operated. But for now, her mission demanded she keep a low profile and finalize the case that had nearly landed her in jail. Regina pulled into a half-full parking lot outside a modest building marked with a small brass plate reading Branch County Field Office, Federal Investigations. The structure blended in with the row of bland commercial storefronts, though a discreet security camera watched the entrance. She took a moment to scan the street. No reporters seemed to have followed her, and the few passers-by showed no particular interest. Satisfied that her presence wasn't drawing unwanted attention, she got out of the sedan and made her way to a side door. Inside, the air was cooler, laced with the faint odor of burnt coffee. She nodded at a receptionist who gave her a knowing smile. then followed a narrow hallway to a room that served as the makeshift hub for her team. Despite the official-sounding label on the building, it was little more than an open-plan space with battered desks, a few computers, and boxes of files stacked under flickering fluorescent lights. Special Agent Cole was hunched over a table covered in photographs. He lifted his head as Regina approached, relief flashing across his face. Tall and lanky, with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetually furrowed brow, he managed a tight-lipped smile. "Glad you're all right," he said. "I couldn't believe it when I heard you got arrested." Regina sighed, setting her purse on a nearby chair. "It was almost worse than that. Judge Blackstone wouldn't let me say a word. Tried to send me to jail on the spot." Cole shook his head in exasperation. "We knew local attitudes might be an obstacle, but we didn't expect them to jump to sentencing without due process. Did you have to flash your credentials?" "I had no other choice." She felt a flicker of anger return, recalling the judge's smug look before he realized his mistake. "I managed to keep the bigger operation under wraps, but I had to reveal enough to avoid going behind bars. It's all sealed now, so we should be safe from leaks." Cole gestured for her to follow him to a large bulletin board pinned with documents and images. A series of arrows connected photos of the luxury condo complex to a construction firm and then to the name of a local politician. "We've been piecing things together while you were out. My guess is the property owners are funneling laundered money through shell companies. The developer, Mendenhall and Gray, has ties to at least 3 other suspicious projects across the state." Regina studied the board, recognizing the same tangle of paperwork she'd been investigating for months. "I was inside last night to check the locked storage rooms. Rumor said they kept paper ledgers there, handwritten logs of transactions. That's what the higher-ups want, so we can confirm the fraudulent deals date back several years." Cole nodded. "Makes sense. Problem is, local security's on high alert now. Word will spread fast that someone was caught snooping. Even if the judge sealed your name, they'll know an intruder was there." Regina set her jaw. "Which means they might move the evidence or destroy it. We need to act soon, maybe get a warrant with the intel we already have." "That's the next step. I've contacted our district supervisor and he's working on it." Cole took a sheet of paper from the desk and handed it to her. "Here's a draft affidavit for a search warrant. The question is whether we try to involve local law enforcement or keep it fully federal. After your close call with Blackstone, I'm inclined to keep it in our hands." Regina scanned the affidavit, double-checking references to property records and finances. "We can't trust the local authorities. If the developers have them in their pocket, or if they're simply as stubborn and reckless as that judge, our evidence could vanish." Cole grimaced. "Agreed. Once the federal warrant is secure, we'll coordinate with a small team. But we have another problem." He tapped a photograph pinned to the board, showing a man in a tailored suit stepping out of a black SUV. "Meet Emery Jacobs, lead counsel for Mendenhall and Gray. He's known for finding legal loopholes to stall investigations. I heard he's already filed a complaint with the local police, claiming the complex had been violated by trespassers looking to sabotage the property." Regina narrowed her eyes. "So if we don't move fast, Jacobs will poison the well. Every time we get close, he'll claim we're harassing them without cause." "That's exactly why we need that search warrant in hand," Cole said. "No room for them to maneuver." Regina felt a stir of determination as she pinned the affidavit onto the board. "We'll handle Jacobs. In the meantime, we should gather everything we have, bank statements, testimonies from former employees, and make sure it's bulletproof. The judge who almost locked me up might be a small fish compared to the developer's legal machine." At that, Cole gave a half smile. "I'd say your near arrest did reveal something. If the local system is that quick to railroad people, then Mendenhall and Gray may find it easy to bribe or bully their way out of trouble. We need to remain vigilant." Regina's phone rang. the display showing a blocked number. She answered to hear her supervisor's voice. He spoke briefly, confirming that a federal magistrate in the state's capital had agreed to review their warrant application that afternoon. Regina felt a wave of relief. They were moving forward with or without local cooperation. After the call, she looked to Cole. "The magistrate wants me to bring the affidavit in person at 3. That's in 2 hours. Could you finalize the supporting documents so I can take them?" "Already on it," he said, gathering a stack of printed emails, receipts, and property transfer records. "You'll have a strong case to present. Maybe we'll walk out with an approved warrant." Regina paused, thinking of her fiasco in court. "I want to make sure nothing implicates me personally. The last thing we need is a reference to that arrest or a suggestion that I compromise the investigation." Cole nodded, adding the finishing touches to the folder. "Don't worry. The official reason you were near the condo is in the sealed portion of the operation. The affidavit only cites general intelligence that illegal documentation is on site. We'll protect your cover." Relieved, Regina took a moment to sip water from a plastic cup on the corner of a desk. Her nerves still buzzed from the morning's events, but she pushed through. The mission was too important to let one bad encounter shake her resolve. She quickly reviewed the final set of documents, scanning paragraph after paragraph of corporate data. It all seemed consistent, painting a damning picture of how Mendenhall and Gray manipulated contracts, artificially inflated construction costs, and laundered vast sums via overseas accounts. Finally, she slipped the papers into a thick file folder, which she locked inside a metal briefcase. "All right," she said, raising her eyes to Cole. "I'll drive up to see the magistrate now. You stay here in case any calls come in." Cole gave her a mock salute. "Good luck. Call me when you're done. I'll fill you in on any new leads." Regina left the field office with purposeful strides, heading for her sedan. She kept an eye out for any unknown vehicles or lingering reporters, but saw none. Once inside the car, she carefully set the briefcase on the passenger seat and pulled away. The route took her from the commercial strip onto the main highway leading out of Branch County. The midday sun glinted off passing trucks and cars, painting bright flashes through her windshield. As she settled into the drive, her mind drifted to that humiliating moment when Judge Blackstone had hammered down the gavel. The memory still stung. She recalled the feeling of helplessness, forced into silence while he dismissed her presence as if it carried no weight. If not for her federal ID, she would be sitting in a jail cell right now, her entire investigation in ruins. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, exhaling slowly. On the one hand, she was relieved to have escaped that nightmare. On the other, she couldn't stop wondering about how many people experienced the same snap judgments without any form of recourse. After all, she was not the first black defendant to stand before a skeptical judge. How many others got railroaded, left to rot in cells for far longer than 30 days? But she had to compartmentalize. Her mission demanded that she stay focused. The condo complex was merely one piece of a much bigger puzzle, one that could reveal entrenched corruption across multiple counties. If Mendenhall and Gray got wind of the full scope, they'd bury their secrets deeper. She needed the magistrate's signature today, so her team could swoop in before the crooks had a chance to destroy the ledgers. Traffic slowed as she approached a toll booth on the interstate. Regina idled behind a line of cars, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel. The talk radio station she had tuned to offered a background murmur of local news. Her ears perked up when she heard mention of a shocking case dismissed in Branch County Courthouse this morning. But the segment abruptly cut to a commercial before revealing details. At least, she thought, the judge's gag order would keep the specifics from being plastered all over the region. Even so, she felt sure rumors would spread. She hoped no one made the connection between that abruptly dismissed trespassing charge and a covert federal operation. Secrecy was essential. The last thing she needed was journalists digging for an angle that might compromise her team. After paying the toll, she accelerated onto the open road. Rows of farmland stretched out on either side, the horizon shivering in the midday heat. The drive to the capital would take about an hour. She used the time to mentally rehearse her pitch to the magistrate. The affidavit spoke for itself, but a personal meeting meant she could clarify the urgency. Those ledgers wouldn't remain in the condo forever. She tried not to dwell on the morning's misfortune. Already she felt her heart rate easing as the courthouse drama slipped into the background. The unstoppable forward momentum of a federal inquiry gave her a sense of control again. She would get the warrant, gather her team, and return under the official cover of law, this time with no chance of being mistaken for a trespasser. One way or another, the truth about Mendenhall and Gray would come to light. Her phone pinged with a text, but she kept her eyes on the road, deciding to read it later. For now, she pressed the gas pedal a bit more firmly. The capital's skyline would soon loom on the horizon, and with it, the next crucial step in her mission. She pictured the chaos that would descend once the search warrant was approved. Agents in unmarked cars, evidence bags, a careful sweep of offices and storerooms. This was the reason she'd spent years honing her investigative skills, to dismantle elaborate scams and hold powerful people accountable. She couldn't let a single overreaching judge derail that mission. In the back of her mind, she made a silent vow. Once this operation wrapped, she would confront the deeper injustices she'd glimpsed in Branch County's courtroom. If Judge Blackstone was so quick to dismiss her voice, how many more defendants had he silenced? Those were questions for another day. For now, she had a search warrant to secure and a precarious investigation to protect. By early afternoon, Regina reached the state capitol, a cityscape of mid-rise government buildings interspersed with historic facades. She navigated one-way streets until she found a parking spot near the Federal District Court building. The structure loomed with gray stone columns, imposing but familiar. She took the briefcase from her passenger seat and stepped onto the sun-baked sidewalk, ready to make her case before Magistrate Willow McCullough. Inside the lobby, she passed through security, an X-ray conveyor, metal detectors, uniformed guards scanning badges. She flashed her federal ID but concealed any other details about her role. The guard eyed her briefly, then waved her through. The building's corridors were lined with brass plaques indicating courtrooms and offices. Despite years of investigative work, Regina still felt a flicker of nerves each time she entered a courthouse, perhaps a leftover from being on the other side of the law earlier that day. She found the clerk's desk for Magistrate McCullough. A trim man in a collared shirt gave her a polite nod. "You have an appointment?" "Yes," Regina replied. "Federal matter, sealed warrant application. My name's Regina Martin." She offered her credentials, which he studied quickly. The clerk typed something into his computer, nodded, and lifted a phone receiver. After a brief, hushed conversation, he hung up and motioned for her to follow a hallway leading to the judge's private chambers. The corridor was long and cool, its marble floor echoing beneath her shoes. At the end sat a thick wooden door with a small brass sign, Chambers of Magistrate Willow McCullough. Regina knocked. A muffled voice answered, and she stepped inside. Judge McCullough was seated at a stately desk piled with files. Her short silver hair formed a tidy frame around a calm, inquisitive face. She wore reading glasses and a no-nonsense expression that softened the moment she saw Regina. "Ms. Martin, correct? I understand you're bringing a sealed affidavit." "Yes, Your Honor." Regina closed the door behind her. "Thank you for agreeing to see me on short notice." McCullough adjusted her glasses and gestured toward an upholstered chair. "Have a seat. I'm told this is urgent. Please lay it all out for me." Regina approached the desk, setting the locked briefcase beside her. She keyed in the combination, and withdrew the thick folder containing the affidavit and supporting documents. As she began to explain the nature of her investigation, a suspected money laundering scheme hidden behind property developments, Judge McCullough followed each word intently, occasionally asking a pointed question. "This Mendenhall and Gray firm," McCullough said, flipping through exhibits of bank statements, "you have reason to believe they keep incriminating ledgers at the condo complex in Branch County. That's correct?" Regina nodded. "We have confidential informants and partial documentation suggesting they track their fraudulent transactions in handwritten logs, which they store off-site. My intel indicates those logs are kept in a locked room at that condo, likely to avoid detection at their main offices." The judge tapped a page with her pen. "And your probable cause rests on these witness interviews plus the suspicious financial records. It seems thorough so far." Regina exhaled, relieved that the magistrate was following the logic. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe time is of the essence. We have reason to suspect they'll move or destroy evidence now that someone tried to access that room last night." McCullough leaned back in her chair. "Yes, I see the note about an unauthorized entry. That was you, I presume?" A flicker of tension crossed Regina's face. "I was conducting covert surveillance. A security guard discovered me, and that incident nearly led to complications in the local court this morning. I'd rather not elaborate too much, but suffice it to say we can't afford to lose the element of surprise." The judge gave a curt nod, evidently sensing the underlying story. "Understood. This is why you want a fully federal operation rather than relying on local law enforcement. You're concerned there may be leaks." "Exactly," Regina said. "We need a sealed warrant so we can move quickly, collect the evidence, and prevent tipping off the suspects." McCullough flipped through the last few pages, scanning them with quick efficiency. "Everything seems consistent. The request falls well within the scope of federal jurisdiction, especially given the interstate nature of the laundering. I don't foresee a problem issuing this warrant." Regina felt a surge of relief. "Thank you, Your Honor." The judge picked up a pen. "All I need is to ensure the language is airtight. Once I sign, it'll be effective immediately. You can coordinate with your team on execution." She made a few notations, scrawling her signature in the designated places, then affixed an official seal. The stack of papers now carried formidable authority. With that warrant, Regina's team could legally enter the condo complex and seize the ledgers, no subterfuge required. "Here you go," McCullough said, handing the pages back. "I'll keep the official copy on file, under seal. If you have any issues during the search, contact my clerk." Regina placed the documents in a sturdy envelope, shaking the magistrate's hand. "We appreciate your expedited review." McCullough offered a tight smile. "Just be careful, Ms. Martin. Investigations like this can expose powerful adversaries." Regina dipped her head, murmuring her thanks. As she left the judge's chambers, she felt a wave of fresh energy. The morning's debacle might have rattled her, but now she had the warrant in hand. This was the key to delivering a legal blow that Mendenhall and Gray couldn't ignore. If all went well, their hidden books would confirm the depth of their corruption. On the way back through the lobby, she checked her phone and saw a missed call from Cole. She returned the call, pressing the phone to her ear. He answered on the third ring, tension in his voice. "Any luck with the magistrate?" "Got it," she said, walking briskly toward the exit. "We're good to go." Cole exhaled audibly. "That's the best news I've heard all day. I've been calling our contact in the regional office to assemble a small team for tonight. Sound good?" "Perfect," Regina confirmed. "We'll rendezvous at our field office, brief everyone, and head to the condo under cover of darkness. They won't expect us with a legitimate warrant so soon." "Right. I'll let them know. Be careful driving back," Cole added, then ended the call. Outside, the afternoon sun glared off the pavement, but Regina barely noticed. She clutched the sealed warrant envelope like a precious artifact. Her mind whirred with plans: how many agents to bring, which route to take, how to handle on-site security. Despite the tension, a thrill coursed through her veins. She lived for these moments when her work felt like more than just chasing paperwork. It was the tangible pursuit of truth, exposing high-level greed that preyed on ordinary citizens. At the car, she eased onto the driver's seat and carefully slid the envelope into her locked briefcase. She took a second to collect herself, then merged onto the highway, heading back to Branch County. This time, the radio station was running local weather updates and a talk show about rising housing prices. It felt ironic listening to the host lament the cost of condos when Regina knew some developments were built on fraudulent money. Traffic was heavier than before, and she found herself inching along behind a slow freight truck. Though impatience tugged at her, she forced herself to stay calm. She had what she needed, the official green light. The rest was just logistics. She flicked through mental checklists, mapping out the best approach to the operation. An hour later, she arrived back at the drab building that housed the federal field office. She parked and walked inside, where Cole and 3 other agents waited, a sense of controlled urgency in the air. On a table lay several boxes of gear: evidence bags, gloves, portable scanners, and flashlights. A large whiteboard displayed the layout of the condo complex, courtesy of Regina's prior reconnaissance. "Warrants in," Regina announced, setting down her briefcase. "We can move tonight." Cole grinned. "We've secured a small unmarked van for transport. Agents Maxwell, Diaz, and Raines will join us." He nodded at the 3 individuals standing nearby, 2 men and 1 woman, all wearing nondescript jackets. Each nodded in greeting. She returned their nods. "We need to keep this low profile. The complex has its own private security. They're not to be trusted. We'll have the official documents to show we're legitimate, but if they spot us too early, they might warn the suspects." Agent Diaz studied the whiteboard. "So we'll park the van a block away, approach on foot, and use the rear entrance you described?" "Exactly. Once we're inside, we'll split into 2 teams," Regina said. "One to secure the manager's office, one to check the locked storage room. We seize physical documents and any computers that might hold backups. Maxwell, you handle digital extraction if necessary." The agent assigned to IT tasks gave a brief thumbs up. "Understood. I have portable imaging tools for hard drives." Cole added, "We also need to be ready for Emery Jacobs, the corporate counsel. If he shows up, let him see the warrant, but don't let him interfere. Any phone calls he tries to make, we monitor. We can't let them coordinate a shred party elsewhere." The group nodded, focused. The plan was coming together smoothly. Regina glanced at her watch. 5:01 p.m. They had a few hours before sunset. Enough time to finalize details and perhaps grab a quick bite, but the tension in the room hinted nobody felt much like dining. They were too keyed up for what lay ahead. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "We'll rendezvous back here at 9:30. That gives us enough cover of darkness. Make sure all vehicles are low profile, no unnecessary sirens or lights. Once we get in, we move fast, photograph everything before touching it, and bag it properly. Clear?" A chorus of "clear" answered back. As the others dispersed to gather personal equipment, Regina lingered at the whiteboard, tracing a path from the complex's rear service entrance to the storage area. She murmured instructions to herself, double-checking corners and camera placements. In her mind, she pictured the moment she would finally see those ledgers. Would they confirm every suspicion? Or might they contain even darker revelations? Her phone vibrated with a new message. "Good luck tonight. Keep me posted." Magistrate McCullough. Regina smiled faintly. It was a rare thing for a judge to reach out personally, but McCullough had clearly sensed the significance of this operation. Cole approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder lightly. "We're doing this, Regina," he said, voice laced with excitement. After so many months of undercover work, tonight it all comes down. She nodded, meeting his gaze with a determined glint. Let's hope we find enough to shut them down for good. No more forced trespassing, no more legal gray areas. This time we go in by the book. In a few hours they would be on site, warrant in hand, shining light on the lies hidden behind the condo's polished exterior. Beyond that, Regina saw a larger horizon. If this operation succeeded, it would expose how unscrupulous developers thrived under complacent local systems. And maybe, just maybe, she could open people's eyes to the kind of rushed injustice she had nearly suffered in that very courthouse. Tonight, she whispered to herself, stepping away from the board, let's bring it all into the open. At 9:20 p.m., the parking lot behind the federal field office sat in hushed darkness, illuminated only by a few scattered lamps. Regina leaned against the side of a plain white van, double-checking the pockets of her windbreaker. She carried a flashlight, spare gloves, a phone connected to a secure channel, and a small lockpick kit in case the door to the storage room required special finesse. The official key to the entire operation, the signed warrant, rested in an inside pocket, safe behind the zipped lining. Nearby, Agents Diaz and Maxwell stood in quiet conversation, their breath visible in the cool night air. Diaz was in her early 30s with keen eyes and a knack for navigation. Maxwell, a stout, soft-spoken technician, was reviewing the portable drive imaging equipment he would use if they found computers worth cloning. Special Agent Cole and Agent Rains carried subdued excitement, each readying small evidence boxes and tamper-proof seals. The plan was straightforward: arrive at the condo complex, show the security gate their federal badge and warrant, then proceed to the private offices inside. Though Regina had previously snuck onto the property, tonight's incursion was purely legal, provided no one tried to obstruct them. She had a suspicion the staff might still attempt to buy time or hide documents, but that was why they had come prepared. All set? Cole asked, checking his watch. We'll roll out in 10 minutes. Regina nodded. I'm good. Let's just hope they haven't moved those ledgers. Diaz brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Even if they have, we should see signs of rapid removal, missing boxes, disorganized shelves. We'll photograph everything. They loaded into the unmarked van, Cole at the wheel, Rains in the front passenger seat, the other three in the back. Regina claimed a corner seat so she could see out the rear windows, ever alert to anyone following. The tension was palpable, yet brimming with anticipation. This was the moment they had prepared for, a legitimate seizure of evidence that could bring Mendenhall and Gray's scheme to its knees. 10 minutes later, the van pulled onto the main highway, headlights low. No one spoke as they passed the city limits. Only the faint hiss of tires on pavement broke the silence, each agent inwardly rehearsing their role. Regina tried not to let her mind wander to the morning's fiasco or to the question of how many times local authorities had thwarted justice in Branch County. For tonight, her focus was purely on the mission. In 30 minutes, they turned down a side road that led to the luxurious grounds of the development. Lampposts lined the manicured lawns, and tall wrought-iron gates guarded the entrance. Beyond those gates, a cluster of condominiums stretched along tidy asphalt drives, each building sporting large windows and newly installed landscaping. The entire place looked deceptively serene in the moonlight. Cole brought the van to a stop at a small guard station where a single security guard in a dark uniform stood. The guard stepped out, shining a flashlight at the windshield. "Evening," he said, suspicion creeping into his tone. "Are you residents or visiting?" Cole rolled down the window and displayed his federal badge. "We're here on official business, with a lawful warrant to enter the premises. Could you open the gate, please?" The guard frowned, shifting his stance. "I need to call the property manager. Nobody told me about—" "That won't be necessary," Regina said from the back seat, leaning forward so the guard could see her. She spoke calmly but firmly. "We have a judge-signed warrant. You can confirm with your superiors if you like, but by law we have immediate right of entry." A tense moment passed before the guard nodded at the seriousness of their expressions. "All right," he muttered, stepping back inside the booth. Moments later, the gate rattled open. The van rolled through slowly, headlights illuminating rows of pristine condo buildings. Regina exhaled. So far, no alarms. Yet she knew that word might soon spread inside. Cole parked near a discreet walkway behind the largest building, precisely where Regina had scouted out the secondary entrance. Everyone stepped from the van, scanning the area. The night air carried the faint hum of insects and the mild scent of freshly cut grass. Rains kept a watchful eye on the perimeter, while Maxwell hefted a compact bag of electronics. "Team A, Diaz, Maxwell, and me, will secure the manager's office," Cole said quietly. "Team B, Regina and Rains, go straight to the storage room. We keep in radio contact, Channel 4. Let's move." They broke off in pairs. Regina led Rains along a well-lit path that flanked the building's side. Each window they passed revealed glimpses of modern decor, fancy lighting, sleek furniture, and a few potted plants. At this hour, few residents seemed to be awake. Only the occasional flicker of a television screen told them some people were still up. At the back corner of the complex, they located a plain gray door with a security keypad. Regina pulled out the small lockpick kit, but Rains tapped her shoulder. "Let me try first," he whispered. "I have the bypass code from the condo's vendor manuals." After punching in a sequence, the lock clicked open. They slipped inside. A narrow hallway stretched ahead, fluorescent tubes casting a pale glow on the tiles. This service corridor led to various utility and storage areas, including the locked room rumored to hold the ledgers. Regina kept her flashlight off, relying on the overhead lights to guide them. She expected any moment to encounter staff or a curious resident, but the place was eerily quiet. They reached a door labeled "Authorized Personnel Only." Regina tried the handle, locked. She fished the warrant from her pocket, just in case someone challenged her, then nodded to Rains. He applied a small electronic device that could manipulate certain older locking mechanisms. After a quiet beep, the door gave way. Immediately, Regina smelled dust and stale air. Inside, tall metal shelves lined the walls, stacked with file boxes and piles of old paperwork. The overhead lights were dim, flickering slightly. She swept her flashlight beam across the room, her pulse quickening. Rains shut the door behind them and turned the deadbolt. "This must be it," she whispered, heart pounding. "We'll search systematically. Start with the left shelf. I'll start with the right." They split up, sifting through boxes. Some contained mundane property management logs, maintenance schedules, supply receipts. Others held architectural blueprints that looked legitimate enough. Regina's mind buzzed with the knowledge that the real treasure would be a ledger or folder that didn't match the official narratives. She sneezed when a cloud of dust billowed from the top shelf. Rains coughed, rummaging through battered file folders. "Lots of daily logs from building contractors, but nothing incriminating yet," he murmured. Regina crouched by a wooden crate on the floor. Opening it, she found thick binders labeled inventory lists. She flipped through them, scanning page after page of typed notes. Nothing about finances. She moved on to another box and discovered large envelopes stuffed with black and white documents. A quick glance showed them to be city inspection reports for the older phases of the complex. She felt a mild frustration creeping in. Where were the ledgers? Meanwhile, she heard faint static on the radio clipped to her belt. Diaz's voice crackled through. "Manager's office is empty. Computer's still on, though. Maxwell is imaging the hard drive. No sign of building staff. Over. Regina pressed her own radio button. Understood. Searching storage area. We'll keep you posted. She turned to Rains. We might need to check behind these shelves or see if there's a hidden section. I can't imagine they'd leave the crucial documents in plain sight. Rains nodded, systematically tapping the walls behind each shelf. After a moment, his knuckles returned a dull thud that sounded different than the rest. He paused. This section feels hollow. Give me a hand. They pulled the metal shelving unit forward. Behind it, a narrow door had been painted the same color as the wall. No handle was visible, just a small latch near the top. Regina felt a burst of excitement. This has to be it. Rains tested the latch. Locked, of course. He rummaged in his jacket for a pry tool, then carefully wedged it into the gap. With a soft creak, the latch gave way, and the door swung inward. Beyond lay a cramped closet, dimly lit by a single bulb. It contained a worn wooden cabinet, locked with a simple padlock. Regina almost smiled. This was exactly the kind of stash that shady operators used to hide incriminating documents. She motioned for Rains to stand aside, then produced a small bolt cutter from her belt pouch. One precise squeeze snapped the padlock's shank. She eased the cabinet door open, shining her flashlight inside. 4 thick ledgers sat neatly stacked, each with a dark cover and faint gold lettering. Beneath them lay a battered folder that looked stuffed with loose pages. Her heart pounded. Found them, she breathed. She pulled out one ledger, flipping it open. Columns of handwritten entries spread across the pages. Dates, sums of money, references to shell corporations. Some margins held notes like transfer to Caymans or client K. Davis. This was precisely the evidence they needed. Hard proof of illicit funds traveling in hidden loops. Rains crouched beside her, shining a second flashlight. That's gold, he said, voice subdued with awe. They can't argue these logs are innocent. It's all spelled out. Regina swallowed. We photograph every page here, then bag them for analysis. She clicked her radio. Cole, this is Regina. We've located the ledgers. Confirmed. Looks like they're stuffed with money laundering entries. A burst of static, then Cole's excited reply. Great work. We found suspicious transaction files on the manager's computer, too. We'll wrap up here and join you. Regina reached for evidence bags. Let's do it carefully. She and Rains snapped photos, page by page, ensuring chain of custody procedures stayed solid. The ledgers were old, some pages yellowed, but every line spelled out the corruption beneath the condo's glossy facade. Midway through bagging the second ledger, Rains tensed. His radio crackled to life again, and Diaz's strained voice came through. Heads up, somebody just pulled into the manager's lot in a black sedan. Looks like a man in a suit. He's heading inside. Cole is trying to intercept, but he might be armed or have extra muscle. Stand by. Regina's stomach tightened. Emery Jacobs, she muttered. That's got to be the corporate lawyer. They might try something drastic if they realize we found the records. She stuffed the last ledger into a sealed bag, heart racing. We have what we need. Let's get these out of here. If Jacobs tries to impede us, we'll show him the warrant and remind him this is a federal operation. Rains nodded, hoisting the evidence bag. Let's go carefully. If he's not alone, we could be in for a confrontation. Regina led the way back through the narrow door, double-checking that they hadn't left anything behind. She prayed they could avoid a physical standoff. But from the tension in Diaz's voice, it seemed this wouldn't be a quiet exit. Clutching the evidence, Regina braced herself for whatever waited on the other side of that storage room door. With the sealed bags of ledgers secure in Rains's arms, Regina eased open the storage room door and peered into the corridor. All remained still under the harsh fluorescent lights, but her instincts screamed that trouble was close. She gestured for Rains to follow, her mind racing through possible scenarios. Emery Jacobs, if it was truly him, would likely be headed either to the manager's office or to this very spot. She could practically feel the tension thrumming in the air. Clutching her radio, she whispered, "Team A, we're leaving the storage area with the evidence. What's your status?" Diaz answered in a terse voice, nearly drowned by background commotion. "We've got Jacobs here. He's demanding to see the warrant. Cole's handling it, but he's not happy. We're near the main office hallway." Regina glanced at Rains. "Let's make our way toward them. Carefully." They moved in tandem down the hallway, footsteps hushed against the tiled floor. When they turned the corner leading to the manager's wing, they heard raised voices echoing. Regina recognized Cole's measured tone, offset by an agitated male voice, surely Jacob's. She tightened her hold on the radio but decided to keep silent, wanting to gauge the situation before she announced their presence. As they approached, Jacob's words became clearer. "This is private property. You have no right to storm in here without giving prior notice. Where is your judicial authorization?" Cole's response was calm. "We showed you the warrant. If you wish to read it more carefully, you're welcome to, but we're already executing it. Interference will not be tolerated." They stepped into view. Jacobs, mid-30s, in a sleek suit, stood just inside the office threshold, posture stiff with anger. Behind him, 2 security guards hovered, uncertain whether to forcibly remove the agents or step aside. Cole and Diaz stood a few feet away, badges visible, with Maxwell near the manager's desk, securing computer equipment in padded cases. Jacobs's gaze snapped to Regina. At once, suspicion flared in his expression. "So you're the one who broke in last night," he said, voice dripping with contempt. "You return with federal backing all of a sudden?" Regina met his eyes, forcing herself to remain composed. "Mr. Jacobs, we have a lawfully executed warrant signed by Magistrate McCullough. We're seizing documents and digital files relevant to an ongoing federal investigation." She handed him a copy of the warrant, the official seal plain as day. "Kindly step aside so we can finish our job." Jacobs's lips tightened. He glanced at the pages, brow creasing with every line he read. "This is outrageous. I could file an immediate injunction." "Go ahead," Cole replied. "We'll be long done by the time you get anywhere with that. All these materials are evidence in a money laundering inquiry. If you want to make calls, do it from over there." He gestured to a side table. "But do not obstruct us." One of the security guards shifted as though preparing to intervene, but Jacobs made a slight motion with his hand, halting him. Clearly, the lawyer understood the risk of physically tangling with federal agents. He exhaled through his nose. "You have no idea how many lawyers and accountants are on standby for Mendenhall and Gray," he warned. "We'll see how far you get with your so-called evidence." Regina felt her temper flicker, but reminded herself to remain professional. "We've already obtained materials that speak for themselves," she said, glancing at the sealed bags in Rains's arms. "We'll let the courts decide." Jacobs caught sight of those bags and frowned. His voice turned sharp. "What's inside?" "That's not your concern," Rains said flatly. "If you have questions, address them to the U.S. Attorney's Office." He slid the sealed bags onto a table, presumably to recheck the chain of custody labels. Jacobs hovered near, eyes narrowed, but did nothing to stop them. Cole signaled for Maxwell to carry on with the computer extraction, then turned to Regina. "We're nearly done here. Manager's laptop is cloned, plus some external drives. You got everything from the storage area?" Regina nodded. "We did. 4 ledgers, 1 stuffed folder. No doubt more than enough to prove the flow of illicit funds. We've photographed all pages to ensure immediate access if there's pushback." Jacobs took a step closer. "I'll need copies of everything," he snapped. "By law, you can't withhold—" "We're not withholding," Cole interrupted, maintaining a veneer of courtesy. "We're collecting evidence. Your discovery requests, if any, will be addressed through proper legal channels. Now, if you'll please move, we need to clear the area." At that, Jacobs let out a low huff. He motioned to the guards, who stepped back with clear reluctance. Diaz had a hand near her holster, though not drawing her weapon, just making sure they knew she was ready. The moment weighed heavily, but Jacobs finally relented. "Fine," he said, "but rest assured, you'll hear from me, and from others far above your pay grade." Cole merely gave a non-committal grunt and nodded to Regina. "We have everything we need?" She double-checked mentally. "Yes, we got the documents. Maxwell has the digital files. Let's go." She lifted her chin at Jacobs. "We'll be leaving now. Unless you plan to physically stop us, I suggest you stand aside." Something dark flickered in Jacobs's eyes, but he took a measured step back, smoothing his tie with a forced calm. "Don't break anything on your way out," he said in a tone that implied a veiled threat. "I'll be sure your superiors know you abused your authority." Regina didn't respond. She led the team down the corridor, agents fanning out to watch for any last-ditch resistance. They exited the building just as they'd entered, but now with vital proof. The night air felt unexpectedly cool against her heated cheeks, and she swallowed to steady her nerves. Even though Jacobs hadn't escalated to violence, she sensed his fury was real, and that it might drive him to lash out in subtler, equally dangerous ways. Reaching the parking area, they loaded the evidence into the back of the van. Maxwell secured the computer data in a locked case, while Rains carefully placed the ledgers in tamper-evident bags. Cole kept watch, scanning the shadows in case Jacobs or the security guards attempted to follow. But no one emerged, and the condo lights glowed calmly, as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened. "All right," Cole said after a moment, voice taut with residual adrenaline. "We're done. Everyone in the van. Let's clear out." They climbed aboard, shut the doors, and Cole started the engine. Regina exhaled, leaning her head against the seatback. The tension in her shoulders pulsed, but beneath it lay a profound sense of accomplishment. They had the ledgers, physical proof that Mendenhall and Gray laundered funds. It might be the biggest breakthrough in her career thus far, overshadowing the morning's near disaster in the courthouse. As Cole guided the van through the gates, the same guard from before waved them out, his eyes wide with undisguised curiosity. Perhaps in the guard's mind this was a bizarre intrusion, but from Regina's perspective it was justice in action. Once on the main road, the van accelerated, and the condo's lights faded into the distance. In the back, Diaz let out a triumphant laugh. "I can't wait to see Jacob squirm in federal court. He was so smug, but we have him cornered now." Rains smirked. "Bet he's calling a dozen people this very minute, trying to figure out how to bury us in legal motions." Maxwell gave a small nod. "Let him. We've got the ledger scans plus backups of every page. They can't make it vanish." Regina stayed quiet, a small smile tugging at her lips. She was relieved, yes, but her mind also shifted to the next phase. Gathering evidence was just step one. Building a bulletproof legal case came next. And that would mean depositions, grand jury procedures, an eventual trial, where Jacobs would no doubt fight tooth and nail. Finally, Cole glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay? You look deep in thought." She sighed, crossing her arms. "I'm good. Just thinking about how we need to handle the aftermath. Jacobs threatened to go after us, maybe even personally. He might try to pin something on me, especially given last night's fiasco. I can imagine him spinning a story that I trespassed unlawfully. Even with a sealed hearing, rumors fly." Diaz shrugged. "We have the warrant. He can't claim we're not legit now." "Still," Regina said, "he might contact the local judge. That same judge who tried to lock me up. Maybe he'll push for an unsealing or twist facts to make the feds look like the bad guys. Cole shook his head. We'll handle it. The U.S. attorney knows how to deal with corporate lawyers, and if Jacobs tries to relitigate your trespassing arrest, we'll bury him in the official documents. Don't worry. Regina forced a nod, letting the hum of the van's tires soothe her. This was the inevitable friction that came with exposing powerful interests. She reminded herself that she had done everything by the book tonight, supported by a valid warrant. If Jacobs tried to create a scandal, they would have the truth on their side. After a half-hour drive, they arrived back at the field office. Raines carried the sealed evidence inside, heading straight to a secure storage area while Maxwell began uploading the digital files to an encrypted server. Cole directed Diaz to file an immediate chain of custody report, ensuring every item was documented. Regina joined her, helping to fill in times, dates, and details. It was methodical work, each step guaranteeing that the evidence would be admissible in court. When the final forms were signed, Cole gathered them in the main office. Great job, everyone. This is a big victory. We'll do a preliminary review of the ledger pages tomorrow morning, then coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's team. Diaz and Maxwell grabbed their things, looking tired but victorious. Raines offered Regina a parting nod. Congrats, he said softly. We wouldn't have found that hidden room if not for your intel. She returned a grateful smile. We did it together. Good work. As they exited, she realized how late it was, pushing past midnight. Her adrenaline still ran high, fueling her mind even though her body craved rest. Cole tapped her shoulder gently. We need to talk tomorrow about next steps, but tonight, go home and get some sleep. You've earned it. Regina recognized the truth in his words, though part of her wanted to keep combing through the ledgers right then. She forced herself to nod. All right, I'll be back first thing. I want to see exactly what those records say about Mendenhall and Gray's finances. Cole locked up the main office door behind them. One day, this is going to blow wide open, Regina, and we'll be the reason. Outside, the parking lot was almost empty under the flickering security lamp. Regina walked to her sedan, bone-weary but buoyed by a sense of real accomplishment. She drove through the deserted streets, mind spinning with the day's extremes, from standing as a silent defendant in front of Judge Blackstone to leading a successful federal raid that uncovered direct proof of corporate corruption. When she finally reached her small apartment, she parked and trudged upstairs. Inside, everything was silent. She turned on a single lamp, set her purse on the kitchen counter, and rubbed at her eyes. Sleep beckoned, but her phone buzzed with a text from a blocked number, likely someone at the bureau. She glanced at it. Congrats. Jacobs called the district director claiming harassment. Don't worry, we've got your back. Good job tonight. She let out a tired chuckle, relief evident in her eyes. Jacobs's immediate complaint confirmed how badly they'd rattled him. She typed a short reply. Understood, thanks. Then silenced her phone. Slipping off her shoes, she sank onto the couch, mind flickering through the day's countless ups and downs. Judge Blackstone's gavel, Jacobs's anger, the hush of that hidden room. At least for now, everything felt right. She had fought to speak her truth, to do her job, to uphold the law. Tomorrow she'd sift through the ledgers for more leads, unraveling each line of hidden transactions. And if Jacobs or the judge tried to retaliate, she'd be ready, armed with official records and the unstoppable momentum of justice. Shutting her eyes, she let the exhaustion pull her under. Tonight's success was only the beginning of a battle far larger than a single condo raid. But it was a start, a sign that no matter how corrupt or arrogant certain individuals were, they couldn't silence the truth forever. The next morning dawned gray and cool, an overcast sky hinting at the possibility of rain. Regina arrived at the field office just after 7, carrying a takeout coffee in one hand and a pastry bag in the other. She felt the weight of a short, restless sleep, but her mind still crackled with energy from the previous night's operation. Inside, she found Cole already at a desk piled with printouts. A few monitors displayed scanned pages of the ledgers they'd seized. He looked up with a wry grin. "Morning. You wasted no time getting here." Regina set her coffee down. "I couldn't sleep past 5. Thought I might as well come in. Any new developments?" Cole gestured to the closest computer screen. "Plenty. We've been sorting through the ledger entries since around 6. I have Diaz and Maxwell coming in soon to help catalog everything. It's even bigger than we thought. I see references to multiple shell companies, more than a dozen, and transactions that total millions." Leaning over his shoulder, Regina scanned the columns of data. Certain entries listed dates alongside coded initials, often followed by sums large enough to fund entire condo blocks. Others mentioned offshore accounts, with arrow-like notations that seemed to funnel funds from place to place. This is definitely not some petty scheme. It's organized money laundering on a massive scale. Cole nodded. "I contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office. They're sending a forensic accountant tomorrow to help interpret these codes. Each transaction is labeled with letters or numbers that might correlate to different corporate investors, maybe even politicians or known criminals." Regina felt a chill at the prospect of just how interconnected the scheme could be. She recalled Jacobs's smug confidence, the way he threatened to unleash a legion of legal tactics. With so many influential players potentially involved, the fallout could shake the entire county, or beyond. "We'll build a rock-solid case," she said firmly. "No matter who's behind it, we have the original ledgers." Cole pointed to a second monitor. The digital files Maxwell grabbed add another layer. There's a spreadsheet tracking preferred clients, along with email drafts referencing special arrangements. The context suggests they were offering laundered funds to those clients as loans or investments, then expecting repayment through fake contracts. We'll know more after cross-referencing. As he spoke, the office door opened, admitting Diaz with an armload of donuts. She gave Regina a nod of greeting, then frowned at the rows of numbers on the screen. "So," she said, plunking the box down on the table, "we're dealing with a financial hydra. Every time you identify one head, 2 more pop up." "Looks like it," Cole agreed, "but the more heads we see, the clearer the pattern becomes. I'd rather have too many leads than too few." Regina snagged a donut, eyes still on the monitors. "Any word from Jacobs this morning?" Diaz rolled her eyes. "He tried calling the field office line before you got here, complaining that we took confidential corporate data and violated the condo owner's privacy. Cole told him to speak with the U.S. Attorney's Office. He threatened to file an emergency injunction again, but so far, crickets." Regina suppressed a smile. "I'm not surprised. He can threaten all he wants, but we have a valid warrant. As soon as he realizes the evidence is undeniable, he'll either change tactics or dig in deeper." Cole flipped to another ledger page on the screen. "Here, look at this." The handwriting was loopy, and the column headers seemed to reference dates from 3 years prior. Next to each date lay a dollar figure and a short code like PR671. Across the page, a separate note read, "Judge, 40K. Diaz leaned in. "Judge? Could that be a reference to a local judge, or just some random label?" Regina's stomach lurched. Could be Judge Harris or Judge Blackstone or someone else in the area. This might mean they paid a judge off or funneled money through them. We need to verify. But if it's real, that's a serious allegation. Cole let out a slow breath. This is what we worried about. Evidence of bribery or collusion in the judiciary. We need to confirm who this is. It might not be Blackstone, but given how quickly he tried to silence you, I'm not ruling anything out. Diaz reached for a fresh notebook. I'll start listing all local judges in the region. cross-referencing any with a last name starting in B or H or something else that might match these cryptic references. She paused, shaking her head in disbelief. This investigation just keeps expanding. Regina closed her eyes momentarily, recalling Blackstone's cold, dismissive glare when she first stood in his courtroom. Had she stumbled into a hornet's nest bigger than even she suspected? If Mendenhall and Gray were paying off multiple judges, local corruption ran deeper than a single scuffle over trespassing. "We can't jump to conclusions without more data," she said carefully. "But let's follow every lead." For the next few hours, they pored over the ledger scans, systematically cataloging each page into a digital database. Maxwell arrived, offering deeper analysis of how each line might correspond to stored emails on the manager's computer. The deeper they dove, the clearer it became that Mendenhall and Gray had orchestrated a massive web of illicit transactions, routing money through layers of shell entities. Around midday, Cole ordered takeout from a nearby sandwich shop, and they kept working through lunch, taking turns chewing while scanning lines of coded finances. A bleak sense of awe settled among them as they realized how much money was flowing under the table. Diaz found at least a dozen references that seemed to indicate payoffs to unnamed officials, some labeled court, some labeled city, and others county. Each was paired with amounts ranging from thousands to tens of thousands of dollars. Regina glanced up from her screen, her expression grim. No wonder Jacobs was so confident. He has half the local infrastructure in his pocket, if these logs are accurate. Maxwell frowned. And if that includes certain judges, any local legal action against them might get sabotaged. We might need a change of venue, or we'll bring in federal courts exclusively. Cole tapped a pencil against his desk. We'll definitely push for that. After the fiasco with Blackstone, we have no reason to trust the local bench. The mention of Blackstone made Regina's chest tighten. She recalled the moment he had pronounced her sentence. If he were involved in this scheme, either directly or indirectly, her run-in with him might have been more than just an unfortunate encounter. Could her presence at the condo have triggered warnings among higher-ups? Was he trying to silence her because he knew what was at stake? She turned to Cole. We need to check if Blackstone's name or initials appear in any of these references. Even if it's a long shot, we can't ignore the possibility. Diaz nodded, scribbling the name Blackstone on her notepad and underlining it twice. I'll do a text search for anything close, though these scans are handwritten so it won't be perfect. But maybe some abbreviations will match. Cole's phone rang, interrupting their huddle. He grabbed it. Special Agent Cole, he said, listening intently. After a moment, he nodded briskly, covered the mouthpiece, and addressed the group. It's the U.S. Attorney's Office on the line. They want a quick briefing. Hang on. He pressed the phone to his ear again, pacing the room while summarizing the stash of evidence they'd uncovered. Regina and the others continued working, only half listening to Cole's end of the conversation. At last, he hung up. They're thrilled with what we've got, he reported. They're assembling a bigger team of forensic accountants and investigators to push forward. In the meantime, they suggest we remain discreet. Jacobs is definitely filing motions, but they're confident any judge at the federal level will dismiss them. Regina exhaled, relieved. That's good. The last thing we need is to be stuck in endless legal delays while the perpetrators bury more evidence. Cole walked to the whiteboard, where the condo's layout still hung in marker outlines. We've done our part, at least for now. The accountants can unravel the specifics. Our next step might involve verifying who these judge references point to. Maxwell checked the time on his phone. I'll keep cross-referencing for a few more hours, then I'll need to log off. We should be prepared to hand over everything in an organized format first thing tomorrow. Diaz rubbed her neck. I'm going to run a quick errand, grab more coffee. Anyone else want some? A chorus of agreement followed. As Diaz headed out, Regina returned to her computer, continuing to search through scanned ledger pages. She felt a hint of apprehension in her stomach. It was one thing to suspect local corruption, but another to see the possibility spelled out in coded entries. Her own run-in with Blackstone had seemed personal at first, simple prejudice or arrogance. Now she wondered if deeper motives lurked beneath his high-handed approach. Maybe he recognized her from some internal communication or had been tipped off that a federal agent was poking around. For hours, the team worked in near silence, occasionally breaking it with a muttered exclamation or request for clarification. Rain began to drizzle against the windows, a soft staccato that made the office feel more claustrophobic. Each page of the ledger told a new piece of the story, forging links between unsuspecting tenants, large corporations, and well-connected officials. By late afternoon, Diaz returned with fresh coffee, and Regina's eyes burned from staring at the screen. She found nothing blatantly stating Blackstone so far, but plenty of cryptic notations: BC Judge, 15K, or H need quiet on zone approval. Possible leads, but not smoking guns. Stretching her arms overhead, Regina rose to her feet. We should probably regroup. Have we found enough specifics to pin down which judge might be on the take, or do we just have hints? Cole beckoned everyone together. Hints, mostly, he replied. But they're strong hints. If we cross-match the timeline of payments with local court decisions, we might see a pattern, like someone ruling favorably on developer cases shortly after a payoff. Diaz scanned her notes. I pulled up county records of major rulings involving Mendenhall and Gray. Judge Harris appeared multiple times, granting them victories in rezoning disputes. Blackstone's name also pops up in some property code enforcements, though not as often. Both are suspicious. We need more time to connect the dots. Regina's pulse kicked up a notch. We'll give it that time. I'll start looking up the docket for cases Blackstone presided over that involved Mendenhall and Gray. We can see if any suspicious rulings coincided with these ledger dates. Sounds like a plan, Cole said. He tapped the whiteboard again, where their leads were scrawled in a web of lines. This is going to explode once the bigger team arrives. They'll want to interview the judge or judges involved, possibly even subpoena them for financial records. Maxwell grimaced. We're poking a hornet's nest, folks. Regina let out a slow breath. We can't stop now. If Blackstone or anyone else is corrupt, exposing them is essential. As the afternoon light waned, they divided tasks among themselves, each agent taking a piece of the puzzle. Regina focused on researching Blackstone's judicial history, pulling up summary judgments, orders, and case archives. Though most were mundane disputes, a handful concerned commercial properties. She flagged each one, looking for connections to Mendenhall and Gray or their affiliates. Time crept into early evening. The rain outside intensified, tapping against the glass. A hush settled in the office, broken only by the occasional rustle of papers or the low hum of a computer. Regina's eyes skimmed line after line of legal text, searching for patterns, until at last she stumbled on a promising entry. Judge Theodore Blackstone presiding over a case brought by a local environmental group against a Mendenhall and Gray subsidiary. The final ruling favored the subsidiary, dismissing environmental concerns for lack of standing. She cross-checked the date. The ledger had an entry 2 weeks before that ruling, Enviro Case PD, followed by an amount of $20,000 and the notation, Court Friend. Her heart thumped. That might be the link. Not definitive proof of a bribe, but suspicious enough to warrant deeper investigation. Cole, she called, beckoning him over. Look at this. She pointed to her screen, explaining how the timeline matched the ledger. Cole's expression grew grim. We might have him, he said quietly. At least there's a strong whiff of collusion. Regina leaned back, her shoulders tense. I knew he was off, but this is bigger than I expected." She remembered how he refused to let her speak, fast-tracking her sentencing. Was that simply his personality, or did he sense she was a threat? Cole placed a hand on her chair. "We'll hand this over to the U.S. Attorney's investigators. Let them dig further. For now, great work. We're that much closer to the truth." Fatigue settled in, but Regina felt a spark of determination flare. If a corrupt judge had tried to silence her in that courtroom, she owed it to every defendant who'd stood there without a powerful ID in their pocket to see that judge held accountable. She closed her laptop with a sense of purpose. Tonight her work would continue, no matter how late it got, because each revelation pulled them closer to dismantling a system that thrived on backroom deals and silent victims. She took a sip of her lukewarm coffee, gaze drifting to the gathered evidence. The ledgers, the scanned documents, the lines tying everything together. It all felt monumental. Soon the truth would burst into public view, and those who built their fortunes on deception and corruption would face the reckoning they'd long evaded. "All right," Regina said, turning to the others. "Let's keep going. We have a job to finish." Night had fully fallen by the time Regina finally shut down her computer and leaned back in her chair, eyes gritty from hours of scrolling through digital case files. The soft hum of the overhead lights provided the only constant in a day marked by startling revelations. Across the room, Diaz, Maxwell, and Raines were similarly hunched over their stations, each chasing a different lead. Special Agent Cole, reviewing a set of external documents, broke the silence first. "You should head home," he said gently, not looking up from the table. "We've made solid progress. Let's pick it up again in the morning." Regina rubbed her temples. "I can't shake the feeling that we're on the cusp of linking Judge Blackstone directly to these bribes. Every new page suggests deeper corruption. If we're right, we can't afford to let him catch wind that we suspect him. He might try to destroy evidence." Cole sighed, turning away from the table to face her. "We're coordinating with the U.S. Attorney. If we get a strong enough indication that Blackstone is involved, they'll act. But we can't just storm his chambers without probable cause." Raines ran a hand through his hair. "I've sorted the ledger references to local officials. One line from last year mentions a BS1 for a rezoning petition. The sum was $35,000. That same month, Mendenhall and Gray got approval to expand near the river." Diaz swiveled in her chair, eyes bleary. "We need to find which judge oversaw that expansion. Was it definitely Blackstone? If so, it's one more piece in a pattern." Regina forced herself to stand. "I'll help cross-check tomorrow, fresh. Tonight, I'll just be spinning my wheels." She knew from experience that exhaustion led to mistakes. "But we need a strategy. If Blackstone's compromised, he might attempt legal sabotage if he learns we're digging. We should keep all references to him off the official docket until we're sure." Cole nodded grimly. "Agreed. This stays in-house. Let's not put anything about him in interagency memos until we have something bulletproof. The moment Jacobs or the judge realizes we suspect them, they'll double down on denial or vanish documents that tie them together." Reluctantly, Regina grabbed her coat. Outside, a cold drizzle still fell, polishing the asphalt under harsh street lamps. She said goodnight to the team, stepping into the damp air. Within minutes, she was back in her sedan, forcing herself to concentrate on each turn through the quiet streets. Though she ached for rest, her mind ran endless loops of possible scenarios. Blackstone's menacing scowl, the coded ledger notes, Jacob's threat to bury them in lawsuits. At her apartment complex, she hurried upstairs. The silence of her living room felt heavy after the day's tension. She towed off her shoes, washed her face, and then sank into the couch, flipping on a small lamp instead of the overhead light. It had been just 24 hours since she'd stood in that courthouse as an accused trespasser. Now, she was on the verge of unmasking a judge who might have taken secret payments for years. Her phone buzzed with an incoming message. She half expected it to be Cole with a late-breaking lead, but the screen showed an unknown number. The text read, "Stop digging where you don't belong." Her stomach clenched. She stared at the words, a chill creeping up her spine. A threat, anonymous but clearly directed at her, presumably from someone allied with Mendenhall and Gray, or worse, from someone inside the local system. Her first instinct was to trace it, but she doubted it would lead anywhere obvious. Usually such intimidation tactics came via burner phones. Sighing, she snapped a screenshot, forwarded it to Cole with a note. "Just got this. Thoughts?" She set the phone aside, heart thudding. She knew intimidation was part of the job, yet it always caught her off guard. It was one thing to face criminals in a controlled environment. It was quite another to feel them intruding on her personal space. Minutes later, Cole's reply arrived. "Send it to the tech guys. We'll see if we can get a location. Be careful." She typed back an acknowledgement, then forced herself to stand. There was no sense in pacing her apartment, letting fear settle in. She double-checked the locks on her door, peered through the peephole at the dim hallway, and decided she needed to calm down. Changing into sweatpants, she made tea and tried to read a novel, though her attention snagged on every tiny noise from outside. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and she drifted to her bed. Sometime after midnight, she managed a few hours of fitful sleep, haunted by half-formed nightmares in which faceless judges swung gavels in silent courtrooms. The following morning, she arrived at the field office early, determined to shrug off the intimidation. Maxwell had news about the threatening text. The phone number used was indeed a dead end, unregistered. He offered a sympathetic shrug. "We expected this, right? Just watch your back. If they're threatening you, it means they know you're a problem for them." Regina set her jaw. "Then we'll become an even bigger problem. Let's see if we can link the condo expansions to Blackstone's past rulings." Diaz pulled up a local docket website. "We have at least 5 decisions in which Blackstone ruled in favor of Mendenhall and Gray's interests. Let's compare them to the ledger entries." Together they carefully lined up dates. It was dizzying work. Sometimes the ledgers mentioned partial sums on one date, then smaller sums a few weeks later, presumably indicating installment bribes. Over and over, they found suspicious matches, money changing hands just before critical decisions. Cole stepped over, scanning the results. If we can confirm these expansions required judicial sign-off or overcame a legal challenge, then each alignment with the ledger becomes incriminating. We'll funnel this to the U.S. Attorney's Integrity Division. They'll decide how to proceed with a potential judge indictment. The hours flew by. Rain battered the windows. Agents came and went, updating each other on leads. Occasionally, Regina's phone vibrated with new blocked number texts. "You won't win," one read. Another said, "Back off or face consequences." She tried to ignore them, but each time her pulse kicked up, as if she were bracing for a knock at the door that never came. Finally, around mid-afternoon, a stern-faced man in a suit walked into the office. Cole introduced him as Alan Peretti, a prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Short and broad, Peretti had a penetrating gaze that swept across the scattered evidence and pinned Regina in place. "Cole speaks highly of your infiltration, Ms. Martin," he said, voice clipped. "I've been tasked with leading the bribery angle. Show me what you've got." They spent an hour laying out everything: the ledgers, the references to Judge, 40K, the rezoning cases, the environmental disputes, the repeated pattern of suspicious rulings. Peretti asked rapid-fire questions, demanding clarity on dates and verifying no leaps in logic. By the end, he looked grimly satisfied. "It's enough for probable cause," he said at last. "We can request the judge's financial records, see if there's an unexplained deposit that lines up with these dates." Regina felt a surge of relief. "And if we find it?" Peretti's jaw tightened. "Then we'll indict. A federal judge would sign the criminal complaint. This sort of corruption undermines the entire judicial system. We'll come down hard." But even as he spoke, Regina recalled how quickly Blackstone had tried to silence her. If he was truly part of a web of payoffs, he'd fight tooth and nail to avoid exposure. And that, she suspected, might push him or Jacobs to strike back at her in more personal ways. Peretti seemed to sense her worry. "We'll handle security if it comes to that. Keep your head down, Ms. Martin. Don't confront him. If Blackstone tries anything, you let us know. Understood?" She nodded, though inwardly she steeled herself. She wanted to see him held accountable, not just for her sake, but for every defendant who'd never been heard in his courtroom. By early evening, Peretti took copies of the relevant ledger pages and left, promising to push for financial subpoenas as soon as possible. The rest of the team continued dissecting the newly uncovered codes, discovering references to other local officials, zoning commissioners, perhaps even city council members. Diaz joked darkly that they might end up indicting half the county's leadership. They ordered pizza and worked past dinner. Maxwell spotted a pattern in the manager's archived emails, references to a special arrangement for the bench, always around the same time as real estate controversies. Another clue pointing to a judge on the take. Regina felt both excitement and a simmering anger. So many decisions, so many lives potentially impacted, all because money had changed hands behind the scenes. Eventually, Cole insisted they wind down. "We'll keep these files locked in the safe. Tomorrow we'll prep a memo for Peretti. If the subpoenas go through, we might have Blackstone's bank statements by the end of the week." Regina nodded, weary. She closed her laptop, reflecting on the irony. Just days ago, she'd been a defendant in Blackstone's court, powerless to speak. Now she was on the verge of collecting enough evidence to bring down his entire career. It felt surreal and dangerous. She walked outside into a drizzle that hadn't let up. Streetlights shimmered on puddles. Her breath fogged the air as she made her way to her car. Checking her phone, she saw no new messages from unknown numbers. That was a small relief. But as she pulled onto the road, she found herself glancing constantly in the rearview mirror. Halfway home, a pair of headlights appeared behind her, then switched lanes and disappeared at the next intersection. She exhaled, realizing she'd been gripping the steering wheel too tight. Fear, she knew, was precisely what they wanted her to feel. She inhaled, forced her shoulders to relax, and reminded herself that truth was on her side. Back in her apartment, she kept only a single lamp lit. In the dim quiet, she pondered how many other crooked officials might be lurking in the ledgers. The longer she looked at each coded entry, the clearer it became that Mendenhall and Gray had spared no expense to ensure favorable rulings. She pictured Blackstone sneering from the bench, then pictured him losing that power in handcuffs. She shrugged off her damp coat and plopped onto the couch, rummaging for her remote. The TV news flickered on. They reported a mild storm, some local crime, nothing about the condo raids. Perhaps Jacobs was still hoping to handle matters quietly, or maybe he was biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash whatever influence he'd amassed. Yawning, Regina let the newscaster's voice fade into background noise. Tomorrow she would return to the office. They'd push forward, building the case piece by piece. She'd connect with Peretti and finalize any documentation needed for subpoenas. If all went well, they'd have a trove of financial records soon, perhaps enough to secure an arrest warrant for Blackstone or others in his orbit. As midnight approached, she reached for her phone to set an alarm. Her hand froze when she saw a fresh text, again from a blocked number. Last warning, Drop the case before it's too late. Her pulse fluttered, but she refused to let panic overtake her. She typed a one-word reply. No, and promptly shut off her phone. Let them threaten her. She would not back down. So much depended on shining a light into the darkest corners of that courthouse. With a steadiness born of exhaustion, she settled into bed, letting the day's events swirl until they receded into restless dreams. Outside, the rain intensified, but inside her apartment she clung to resolve. She would see this mission through, no matter who tried to intimidate her. The ledgers, the coded payoffs, everything pointed to a reckoning. And though the storm ahead might be fierce, she had no intention of stepping aside. By dawn, the storm clouds had drifted off, leaving Branch County under a flat, gray sky. Regina arrived at the field office even earlier than usual, fueled by both determination and the aggravation of yet another anonymous threat. She found Diaz already flipping through fresh printouts. The office felt nearly empty, with half the desks still unoccupied, but Diaz's expression was tense. Cole just called in, Diaz said as Regina slipped off her coat. He wants us to meet him at the U.S. Attorney's office in the city. Something about an emergency conference. He sounded rattled. Regina set her bag aside, heart tightening. Is it about Blackstone? Diaz shrugged, shutting down her computer. Probably. Peretti's subpoenas for financial records were supposed to go through last night. My guess is we've stirred up a hornet's nest. Let's go find out. They locked up the main workspace, hopped into Diaz's sedan, and sped away under a thin drizzle that returned without warning. The city's streets seemed subdued, as though waiting for the day's next development. Regina stared out the window, replaying the text messages she'd received. Each threat rattled her, but she refused to yield. This morning's meeting would reveal how close they were to toppling the corrupt network. They arrived at a stately government building downtown, where Cole and Maxwell were waiting outside under an overhang. Both wore grim looks. The four agents entered together, took an elevator to the 8th floor, and found their way to a large conference room where Assistant U.S. Attorney Alan Peretti stood conferring with two other prosecutors. Boxes of files lined the walls, their labels indicating different arms of the Mendenhall and Gray investigation. Peretti wasted no time. "Thanks for coming," he said, beckoning them to a table in the center. "We have an urgent situation. Last night we filed requests for Judge Blackstone's financial records and personal communications. The judge apparently got wind of it." Regina's pulse quickened. "Meaning what?" Peretti pursed his lips. "Our insider at the courthouse says Blackstone demanded an emergency hearing to quash any subpoenas related to him. The hearing is set for this afternoon, in front of a state judge who's known to side with local officials. If that judge grants Blackstone's request, we lose immediate access to his finances. It might delay the entire process by weeks, if not longer." Diaz let out a frustrated breath. "We were hoping to keep it quiet until we had the documents, but obviously someone tipped him off. Jacobs might be pulling strings." "Undoubtedly." Peretti flicked through a sheaf of papers on the table. "He's also filed a motion asserting that your search at the condo was unconstitutional, which is patently false, but he claims the ledger references are fabricated and unreliable hearsay. Their angle is to paint you all as rogue agents." Cole's jaw set. "We have the warrant, the evidence, everything done by the book. They can't just wave that away." Regina forced herself to stay calm. "Is there any chance the federal court will intervene before the state judge makes a ruling?" Peretti shook his head. "We're trying. But the hearing is less than 6 hours from now. Unless we secure a federal injunction, Blackstone might get a temporary restraining order that stops us from digging further. That's their aim. Stall the investigation until they can bury more evidence." An older prosecutor stepped forward, introducing himself as Carter Mills. I've seen these tactics before. You'll need to present a strong argument at the hearing, or else those subpoenas are toast. Normally, we'd let the federal process play out, but they're using state channels to sabotage it. Regina's eyes narrowed. We'll fight it. I'm prepared to testify about how we found the ledgers. Cole can back me up on the legalities of the warrant. Peretti looked at her thoughtfully. That might help, but be careful. You're the one who nearly got thrown in jail by Blackstone. If you appear in open court, Jacobs could cross-examine you, dredging up your arrest to cast doubt on your motives. She swallowed, recalling the humiliating morning when Blackstone had refused to hear her side. But retreating now would only embolden them. I'll do it, she said. They won't intimidate me. Cole nodded. We stand with you. We'll show them we have nothing to hide. Peretti handed over several folders. Here's a summary of the key ledger entries connecting Blackstone to Mendenhall and Gray. We'll need you to explain how you discovered these documents during the authorized search. Then Carter Mills or I will argue that Blackstone's move is a clear conflict of interest. He shouldn't be able to shield his finances from federal scrutiny just because he's a sitting judge. They spent the next few hours preparing. Regina memorized the timeline of the condo raid, the reasons behind it, the official steps taken. She rehearsed how to counter Jacobs's likely accusations, that she trespassed initially, that the ledger references might be forged, that the entire investigation was a vendetta. Every time she felt a twinge of nerves, she recalled the coded lines about paying a BS1 judge. Anger steadied her. If Blackstone was truly corrupt, he needed to be exposed, no matter how high the stakes. By noon, they piled back into Diaz's car and drove to the Branch County Courthouse. Regina felt a wave of déjà vu stepping onto the same stone steps where she'd nearly been sent to jail. Today, though, she arrived as a witness for the U.S. Attorney's Office with official backing. Cole, Diaz, and Maxwell flanked her, while Peretti and Mills carried briefcases bulging with evidence. Several local reporters stood outside, snapping photos as they entered. Inside, they navigated the marble hallway until they reached courtroom 2. It felt smaller than the main room where Blackstone typically presided. A different judge, Marion Willoughby, was assigned to hear the emergency motion. Regina recognized Jacobs the moment she entered. He was near the front, talking heatedly with a group of men in suits. She also saw a figure in a dark robe at a side door, Judge Blackstone standing stiffly, though he wore a more subdued expression than usual. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone took their seats. Jacobs rose, launching into a passionate argument. We are here because unscrupulous federal agents have overstepped constitutional boundaries. They seized private records, twisted them to imply wrongdoing, and now they demand to pry into the finances of an honorable state judge. This is an outrage, Your Honor. Regina clenched her fists under the table, reminding herself to remain composed. Peretti waited for Jacobs to finish, then methodically explained how they had obtained a valid search warrant, found the ledgers that strongly indicated bribery, and requested Blackstone's financial records as part of the legitimate investigation. He presented the judge with copies of the ledger scans, highlighting suspicious correlations with Blackstone's rulings. Jacobs retorted, lacing his words with scorn. These so-called ledgers have no chain of custody prior to the raid. For all we know, Ms. Martin planted them herself. After all, she was arrested for trespassing on the property the night before the search. Regina felt hot anger surge through her. She looked to Peretti, who gave her a nod, silently granting permission to speak. She rose, addressing Judge Willoughby directly. That arrest was dismissed within minutes once the court realized who I was and that I had legitimate investigative authority. The documents we seized were under the oversight of multiple federal agents, all following standard evidence protocols. No one planted anything. Jacob's glare bored into her. And you expect us to take your word for it, Ms. Martin? You, who crept onto private property? Whose entire presence in this county is suspect? Peretti objected. Your Honor, counsel's remarks are irrelevant. The question here is whether the evidence strongly suggests misconduct by Judge Blackstone. We have no reason to fabricate anything. We want only the financial records that might confirm or refute those ledger entries. Jacobs scoffed. Judge Blackstone is a respected member of our community. This fishing expedition is a smear campaign. If the U.S. Attorney is so confident, they should proceed in federal court, not drag a state judge through the mud. That was the pivot, Regina realized. Jacobs trying to stall and shift the matter away from a direct confrontation. She inhaled slowly, controlling the urge to interrupt. Across the aisle, Blackstone sat silent, face pale, shoulders stiff. He offered no comment, letting Jacobs do the talking. Judge Willoughby, a stern woman in her 60s, cleared her throat. I understand the passions involved. However, we must address the legal standard. The federal government seeks these financial records due to probable cause indicated by ledger entries, correct? Do these entries plainly reference Judge Blackstone? Mills stood. Yes, Your Honor, and we have cross-referenced them with actual rulings that align suspiciously with the timing of large deposits in these coded logs. Denying us access to confirm or deny that link would hinder a legitimate investigation. Willoughby folded her hands. Mr. Jacobs, your motion contends that these subpoenas are harassment. Yet if there's genuine probable cause, it's not harassment, it's standard procedure. How do you propose we differentiate? Jacobs flicked a glance at Blackstone, then squared his shoulders. We propose an independent review by a neutral party, rather than turning over personal records to Ms. Martin and her associates who have shown bias. Let the court appoint a special master who can examine the judge's finances and see if any connection truly exists. Willoughby frowned. That might be feasible, but it would take time. The question is whether to grant a stay preventing the federal team from accessing those records immediately. The government claims delaying will allow potential destruction of evidence. Peretti jumped in. Exactly, Your Honor. We suspect certain individuals already tampered with or removed data once they realized Ms. Martin's presence. The risk is too high if we wait. A tense hush followed. Regina's heart pounded. She silently prayed Willoughby would see the bigger picture. If the judge ruled in Blackstone's favor, they might lose the chance to gather crucial proof. The hush broke as Willoughby took a deep breath, scanning the gallery. At last she spoke, each word deliberate. I will not quash the subpoenas outright. However, I am inclined to impose a short delay for a special master to be appointed, no more than 7 days. During that time, Judge Blackstone's financial institutions must preserve all relevant records. No files may be deleted or destroyed. If any evidence vanishes, I will view it as a contempt issue. Jacobs's shoulders fell slightly in relief, while Peretti looked uneasy. Regina swallowed her frustration. 7 days might be enough time for Mendenhall and Gray to quietly cover their tracks, especially if Blackstone tried to help them. Yet Willoughby's compromise at least prevented an outright blocking of the investigation. The hearing is adjourned, Willoughby declared. I expect the U.S. Attorney's Office and Mr. Jacobs to cooperate in good faith with the special master. If foul play occurs, this court will revisit its decision. A bang of the gavel sealed the outcome. Tension vibrated in the room. Blackstone rose stiffly, ignoring Regina's glance. Jacobs quickly gathered his papers, his smirk returning. He nodded curtly at Regina and her colleagues before following the judge out. The gallery emptied in a swirl of whispers and hushed speculation. Regina turned to Peretti. So we have a partial victory or a partial loss? Peretti exhaled. It means we're in limbo. We can't directly review Blackstone's records. We must wait for the special master's initial screening. But at least Willoughby didn't kill the subpoena. Cole joined them, looking somber. 7 days is enough for them to do damage. Jacobs will be on the phone right now, orchestrating any cover-up they can manage. Regina watched Blackstone vanish through a side door, her thoughts churning. They had come so close to forcing a full disclosure. Now, every step hinged on whether evidence stayed intact. A swirl of frustration and renewed resolve coursed through her. She wouldn't let them slip away. If the system demanded patience, she'd comply, but she'd also keep her eyes open for any sign of tampering. "Let's regroup," she said, voice low but determined. "We have a week to watch them. Maybe we can find other sources or witnesses that confirm the bribe trail. If they try to shred documents, we'll catch them in the act." Peretti nodded, leading them out of the courtroom. Cameras flashed. Reporters clustered, hungry for quotes. But Regina kept her head down, ignoring the shouted questions about a federal investigation into a local judge. At least for now, they had to keep the specifics under wraps. As she and the others stepped into the overcast afternoon, her phone buzzed again. Another blocked text. "A delay is all we need. You lose." Her stomach twisted, but she took a slow breath, letting her anger fuel a quiet determination. They might have 7 days, she thought, but they'd be 7 days of intense scrutiny. One way or another, the truth would surface, and this time she refused to be silenced. Regina spent the next 7 days in a blur of vigilance and frustration. Despite Judge Willoughby's ruling that the special master would handle Blackstone's financial records, there was no telling how much mischief Jacobs and his allies might cause in the interim. She and her colleagues at the field office doubled down on every angle, following digital breadcrumbs, verifying testimonies from former employees of Mendenhall and Gray, and keeping watch for any sign that documents were being destroyed behind closed doors. Each morning, Regina woke to the grim reality of fresh threats on her phone. The messages had grown more pointed. "Time's almost up," or "Your career ends soon." She dutifully passed each new text on to Cole and the U.S. Attorney's Office, but the source remained elusive. At times, she wondered if Jacobs was behind it, or if Blackstone himself was pulling strings. Whoever it was, they wanted her rattled. Yet with every new warning, her resolve hardened. The more they pushed, the more determined she became to see it through. By day 5, the special master, a retired federal judge named Tuttle, arrived in Branch County and set up shop in a cramped office next to the main courthouse. Tuttle, stern and meticulous, sent formal letters to Blackstone's bank and investment firms, demanding prompt delivery of all statements and transaction histories. Regina's heart leapt when she learned Tuttle had personally warned the institutions that any delay or tampering would be treated as contempt. At least they had one ally with genuine authority, someone who might prevent secret shredding of crucial proof. Still, tension hovered in the air like a gathering storm. Jacobs attempted to file more motions, peppering the docket with accusations of federal overreach and personal vendettas. None stuck, but each filing ate precious hours of legal wrangling. Meanwhile, Regina and Diaz pored over every ledger entry, chasing down leads that linked bribe amounts to key rulings. The pattern was stark. On multiple occasions, Mendenhall and Gray paid large sums right before Blackstone delivered judgments favoring their projects. It was more than circumstantial. It looked like a textbook case of corruption. On day 6, Cole received a tip from an unexpected source. A junior accountant at one of Blackstone's favored banks left a cryptic voicemail saying she'd discovered an unlogged wire transfer that matched an entry in the ledgers. "It's in the name of a shell company," she whispered, "but it leads right back to the judge's personal account." She refused to leave her name or contact details, clearly terrified, but she agreed to leak copies of the transaction receipts if Regina's team provided a secure email. Within hours, a trove of digital scans arrived, a single wire for $50,000, dated precisely 1 week before a major land use case. It was yet another piece of the puzzle, further tightening the noose around Blackstone's neck. That evening, as the final 24 hours of the mandated delay approached, Regina and Cole prepared a briefing for Special Master Tuttle. They collated the ledger references, the newly arrived wire receipts, and a compilation of Blackstone's questionable rulings, each cross-referenced with suspiciously timed financial inflows. They worked late into the night, fueled by stale coffee and the urgent hope that Tuttle would see the blatant pattern and allow the U.S. attorney to proceed. On the morning of Day 7, Regina woke before dawn, her nerves raw. She drove to the field office under a cold, steel-colored sky. Cole was already there, pacing near the entrance. "We just got word," he said, voice taut. "Tuttle wants to meet us in his temporary chambers this afternoon to discuss the bank records. Apparently they're in." Regina's heart pounded. "Did they deliver everything?" "Most of it," Cole said. "No idea what's inside, but Tuttle says it's enough to warrant immediate review." He paused, scanning her face. "You ready?" She nodded, though her stomach churned. This was the moment. If the bank records mirrored the corruption spelled out in the ledgers, Tuttle would have all he needed to lift the stay, letting the U.S. Attorney's Office move forward with charges. If, for some reason, the records were doctored or incomplete, the case could stall again. And Regina could only imagine what new threats might surface. They spent the morning finalizing documents, conferring with Peretti about how to present evidence if Tuttle permitted a hearing that same day. Each hour dragged, but at last they made their way to the courthouse annex, a modest room where Tuttle had established his command. A clerk ushered them in, and they found Tuttle hunched over a thick sheaf of statements, his eyes scanning line after line. "Sit," Tuttle said brusquely, not bothering with greetings. He flipped a page, set it down. "I have reviewed the newly arrived bank data, Ms. Martin. It aligns almost exactly with the suspicious pattern in your ledgers. Large sums deposited into Judge Blackstone's personal account shortly before he issued rulings that benefited Mendenhall and Gray." His tone was neutral but laced with disapproval. Regina exhaled, relief and anger entwined. "So there's no question the bribery references match these actual deposits?" Tuttle pursed his lips. "The amounts and dates align too well to be coincidence, and at least 2 of the deposits came from shell corporations that Mendenhall and Gray used. It's damning evidence." He drummed his fingers on the desk. "I see no justification for further delay. The subpoenas stand. I'll be issuing a formal recommendation that the U.S. Attorney's Office has grounds to pursue criminal charges against Judge Blackstone." Cole looked ready to pump his fist in victory, but Tuttle held up a cautioning hand. "One caveat. I anticipate Jacobs will challenge these findings. He'll claim the judge can offer alternative explanations. But from my vantage, it's quite conclusive." Tuttle closed the folder with a decisive snap. "I'll file my written opinion within the hour. After that, the next step belongs to the federal courts." Regina fought back a smile. "Thank you, Your Honor. We appreciate your thoroughness." Tuttle nodded. "I intend to keep a close eye on any further developments. This is exactly the kind of corruption that undermines public trust in the judiciary." Then he waved them off. "Go on. Do what you must." Back outside, Cole could no longer contain his excitement. He clasped Regina's shoulder. "We did it. Or at least, we're through the biggest hurdle." She returned the grin. "Now Peretti can file the criminal complaint. We'll see how quickly they can get an arrest warrant." Around them, the hallway bustled with clerks and lawyers, oblivious to the significance of Tuttle's impending recommendation. Regina felt a surge of satisfaction and caution. If Jacobs and Blackstone realized how bad it looked, they might make one final desperate play. She was determined to remain vigilant. Within 2 hours, news trickled in. Tuttle had indeed filed a written report, concluding that the financial evidence indicated probable cause of bribery. Peretti wasted no time drafting a criminal complaint, alleging that Blackstone had violated federal law by receiving illicit payments. By mid-afternoon, a federal magistrate signed off on a sealed arrest warrant for Judge Theodore Blackstone. Regina's phone buzzed with the update. She nearly cried out in relief. "Finally," she muttered. "Justice." Cole quickly rallied the team. They arranged for a quiet operation to arrest Blackstone before word spread. The plan involved Peretti, 2 U.S. Marshals, and Regina's group as backup. The objective was to intercept the judge at his private chambers rather than the courthouse, minimizing publicity. Regina readied herself, a swirl of nerves and triumph fueling her. Twilight cast long shadows across the streets as 2 unmarked cars pulled up to a stately brick building where Blackstone kept his personal office. A brass plaque on the door read, "Theodore Blackstone, Esquire Legal Consultation." Through the window, Regina spotted a single light burning inside. They approached carefully. One marshal knocked, the other stood to the side. Cole and Regina hovered nearby, badges tucked away for the moment. Seconds ticked by, and tension rose. Finally, the door opened a crack. Judge Blackstone's face appeared, pale in the soft glow. He recognized the marshals at once, and his eyes widened with alarm. "Judge Blackstone," the lead marshal said, voice firm, "we have a federal arrest warrant against you for charges of conspiracy, bribery, and fraud. Please step outside." For a moment, Blackstone froze. Then he tried to slam the door. The marshal blocked it with a forceful shove. Inside the small lobby, Blackstone stumbled back, panic twisting his features. "This is outrageous," he spat. "I am a sitting judge. I won't be manhandled like a common criminal." Regina stepped in, lockstep with Cole. She kept her voice steady. "You're under arrest, Your Honor. The evidence is overwhelming." Blackstone's gaze darted to her, recognition and hatred flaring. "You!" he snarled, voice trembling. "You set this all in motion." She recalled the sting of him refusing her chance to speak in his courtroom. She recalled the fear she felt. Now, facing him in the final reversal, she felt only resolve. "I simply revealed the truth," she said quietly. "You did the rest, Judge." The marshals ordered him to turn around. He struggled briefly, but they pinned his arms and cuffed him, reading him his rights. Regina heard the echo of lines so many defendants must have heard in his courtroom. This time, there would be no easy escape for him. Cole carefully took an inventory of Blackstone's pockets and briefcase, ensuring no documents vanished. Outside, a few neighbors peered from windows, startled by the commotion. Once the marshals led Blackstone away, Jacobs materialized on the curb, breathless and disheveled. He must have come racing over at the first sign of trouble. "This is a travesty!" he shouted, blocking the path to the waiting car. "He's innocent until proven guilty. You have no right—" Peretti calmly stepped between Jacobs and the marshals. "A federal judge signed the warrant. You can challenge it in court, but for now, your client's in custody." Jacobs looked ready to protest further, but one glare from a marshal made him fall silent. He stepped aside, letting them guide Blackstone into the unmarked sedan. Then Jacobs rounded on Regina, pointing a shaking finger. "You'll regret this," he said, voice quivering with fury. "One day, you'll see the consequences of overreaching." She squared her shoulders. "The only consequence should be accountability for those who abuse power." He sputtered, unable to form a coherent reply, as Cole and the others escorted Blackstone away. Regina stood for a moment under the early evening sky, watching Jacobs slump against the building's facade. She almost felt pity for him, almost, but she remembered the texts, the intimidation, the entire structure of bribery and fear that had propped up his client's empire. Justice was coming. When the car carrying Blackstone vanished around the corner, Regina exhaled, her pulse still pounding. Cole placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "It's done," he said softly. "We have him. No judge is above the law." She nodded, heart thick with mixed emotions. "No, they're not. And now he'll have to face what he's done. Maybe this will give others a chance to be heard. People who never got a fair shake in his court." Together they walked to their own vehicle, leaving Jacobs fuming in their wake. The city lights flickered on, illuminating a world where, for once, corruption wouldn't go unchallenged. Regina settled into the passenger seat, letting her gaze wander across the skyline. Relief coursed through her, tempered by the knowledge that trials, testimonies, and more battles lay ahead. But for tonight, she allowed herself to savor the triumph. Judge Blackstone, who once silenced her, would finally have to answer for his actions in a court of law, this time with no power to dismiss the truth or cut her off before she could speak.